very much. Mr. President, I'm here this afternoon because from the people who brought us Trump Care that was so favorable to the fortunate few and the special interests, now comes legislation that's going to make it harder for working people and working families to save for their own retirement. So kind of put that in context. Whenever we have a debate about retirement, we always hear people say, you know, you just ought to realize that Social Security, this earned benefit, an earned benefit for Americans, you've got to realize it's not going to cover everything. You've got to save privately. You've got to save for your retirement. And now what we're seeing is the powerful special interests, the people with deep pockets and great political influence, are talking about restricting the chance for those typical working families to do the very thing that those people usually say is the solution. They say, you know, we can't have government programs. You got to save privately for your retirement. And now come along those very powerful special interests, and they want to talk about restricting the ability of working families to save privately. So we are now debating the first of two resolutions that would put a huge dark cloud over the new programs with individual retirement accounts called auto-IRA programs that states like mine and a handful of cities are seeking to build. Right now, immediately, it is the locally based programs that are trying to promote private saving, giving the working class family the chance to do it. They're the ones that could be undermined. And of course, depending on what happens around here, the state programs could be next. So at this time in American history, when we are facing a very large challenge with respect to savings, when a little over half of the workers approaching retirement age have nothing, zero, saved in retirement accounts such as individual retirement accounts or 401k plans, these resolutions, these two resolutions, amount to a game plan that would take the savings crisis, which is already bad, and make it worse. Around 55 million Americans don't have access to a retirement plan at work. More often than not, it's the employees of small and medium-sized businesses who don't have that job benefit, and it is no fault of their own. In my view, this shouldn't even be a bipartisan question. There ought to be bipartisan interest in helping these workers find new opportunities to save. It ought to be easier than it is today. I see my friend and colleague from the Finance Committee in the chair, and as he knows, we've had countless committee hearings in the Finance Committee. We've been part of multiple floor debates when I've heard members on both sides of the aisle talk about the importance of private saving. Yet here we are in the Senate, and yet we're looking at an effort on the part of the majority at this point that wants to ram through resolutions that would make it harder to save, not easier. So juxtapose what's going on today and then think about all of the committee hearings in the Finance Committee, in the Health Committee. We hear people talk about private savings. We ought to make it easier. We ought to have smarter policies. Today, the United States Senate is looking at making it harder for working families to save, not either. Now, here is a little bit of background about this and what it means to my home state, Oregon, and we're looking at winning the NCAA championship here in a few days. So there are a lot of things we're talking about in Oregon right now, but I wanted to especially come and talk about another area where we are leading right now, and that is trying fresh approaches to retirement savings. Oregonians want, as a state, to help close the gap for the 55 million Americans without an employer-sponsored plan. After a lot of study and careful planning, my home state of Oregon is one of a handful of states that have passed what has come to be known as an auto-IRA. The actual name of the program is Oregon Saves. It's set to launch this summer. What it means, and the highlight of it, Mr. President, is this is a voluntary program, but we're creating a new set of opportunities for workers to actually save. What it means in my state is if you're a worker at one of these businesses, when you get a job, you'll get a retirement account and you'll be able to start saving. Now, I want to emphasize, it is not mandatory. Any worker who wants to opt out could do so, but it's designed to be simple and easy to use for everybody involved. And I'd like to describe, Mr. President, just for a moment, some of my conversations with Oregonians and workers who have been part of these auto-IRAs. They come up, I have town hall meetings in every county in my state. I've had a little over 800 now, and we've discussed savings. And they come up often and they say, you know, I've been hearing about these new IRAs and I'm automatically enrolled in one. And then they say, you know, if they hadn't automatically enrolled me in it, I probably wouldn't have done it, because there's always an expense in our household. There's always something that we think we probably should do, and we would say to ourselves, we better do that now, and we can come back and talk about saving later. And those employees have come up and they said, probably wouldn't have done it without this automatically enrollment. But Ron, I'm so glad that we've got it, because I have seen that this is really beneficial, and it, in effect, has persuaded me that I've got to take a very disciplined approach. And I'm glad that this is automatic, and I especially like the fact I've got the last word on the subject. In other words, if I feel for one reason or another I can't do this automatic saving, there'd be an opportunity for me to opt out. So it is automatic, and it provides this path for people to start saving. It's cost effective, it's straightforward for employers, eliminates a lot of red tape and administrative hassle, and most importantly, it gives the worker the last word, the right to opt out of this. Now, the Trump administration says that it wants to cut red tape that burdens business. This legislation, in my view, does the opposite. It makes it harder for small businesses to provide retirement savings programs for their workers. And I can tell you that one after the other, Oregon employers are raving about the opportunity the program represents for them, especially when it comes to recruiting and retaining top-notch employees and helping those workers build a nest egg. And I just gave you, Mr. President, a little bit of empirical evidence from these community meetings that I hold that workers say they particularly like what this does. It's almost like a little bit of a nudge to save and build your nest egg. Judy Randall, the finance director of an affordable housing provider in Roseburg, Oregon, says it would make a big difference for a nonprofit organization, a rural nonprofit organization, to have Oregon Saves to help employees secure their retirement. She is, Joy Anderson, another Oregon leader, the administrator of the Asher Community Health Center in Fossil, Oregon. I had my first community meeting. That's a small town of about 500, and Joy has talked about how important it is to her to have an attractive retirement plan to recruit employees to come work in Fossil in Eastern Oregon. Kevin Max, who runs Statehood Media from Bend, is operating a small company with big aspirations, and he notes that there is no better state in the country than Oregon when it comes to employee recruitment. He says that Oregon Saves gives companies like his another leg up with an even better package of benefits. I just believe it defies logic that in light of all of these positive returns from employers and from workers, that the Congress would just want to stamp out a program like Oregon Saves that has so much potential, but the resolution going after state initiatives, and there are two, would pose that kind of threat. My view is, Mr. President, that these are not easy programs for states or cities to set up. There are legal issues that date back decades that you have to work through. So there's a lot of heavy lifting here at the Labor Department to get the legal roadblocks out of the way. If these resolutions pass, it would wipe out months and months of work that has gone into making this kind of state and local-based partnership possible. So I would just say in wrapping up, Mr. President, that this particular issue ought to be a no-brainer. Saving in the private economy is the right thing, as I've said, for a host of reasons. People scrimping and saving and set aside money for retirement is the key to a healthy retirement policy so that you have everybody in a position to have a dignified retirement rather than stretching every penny they have, relying just on Social Security, family members, and food banks to make ends meet. I believe our people want the opportunity to save, and they like the idea of this automatic IRA because it is fair to workers and fair to employers. And my view is the Senate ought to stand up and recognize that this is a chance, by voting against these ill-advised resolutions, to support the interests of working people who would like to save in the private economy ahead of special interests. I hope the Senate will do the right thing for those hardworking people and their families and vote these resolutions down. With that, I yield the floor, and I note, Mr. President, the absence of a quorum.